You're staring at your computer screen, looking at the direct deposit that just hit your account. It's the first paycheck since your annual review, the one where you finally got that 8% raise you've been chasing for 18 months. You should feel like a champion. You should feel like you finally crested the hill and the view is supposed to be great from here. But then you look at your pending transactions. Rent is up, the car insurance bill just jumped for no reason, and you realized you spent $75 on a quick grocery run that mostly consisted of eggs, milk, and a single bag of fancy coffee. By the time you do the mental math, you realize that your new bigger paycheck is already gone. You have exactly the same amount of fun money as you did when you were making $10,000 less. You're standing in the exact same spot, just on a more expensive piece of ground. It's a hollow, frustrating feeling that makes you want to throw your laptop out the window and just give up on the whole idea of getting ahead. My name is Sam, and I spend too much time thinking about why your money feels like it's evaporating into thin air. If you want to stop the cycle of chasing a horizon that keeps moving away from you and actually start keeping the money you earn, hit that subscribe button. We don't do fluffy financial advice here. We just look at the cold, hard reality of your bank account. The problem we're talking about today isn't just inflation, though that's the easy scapegoat everyone likes to yell at. It's something much more subtle and much more dangerous to your long-term sanity. Think of your income like a gas. In physics, a gas will always expand to fill the exact size of the container it's in. If you have a small container, the gas is compressed and tight. If you move it to a larger container, it doesn't just sit in the corner. It spreads out until it touches every single wall. Your lifestyle is the container. Unless you are incredibly intentional about building the walls of that container yourself, your spending will naturally expand to fill every single cent of your income. It doesn't matter if you make $50,000 or $150,000. If the container doesn't have a lid, the gas is going to fill it, and you're always going to feel like you're running out of room. Let's look at the actual math of a raise, because this is where most people lose the game before they even start playing. Let's say you're making $60,000 a year and you get a $10,000 bump to $70,000. On paper, that feels like a massive win. But here is what actually happens. First, Uncle Sam takes his cut. Depending on where you live, that $10,000 raise is actually more like $7,500 after taxes. That's about $625 extra per month. Now, maybe you decide it's finally time to move into that apartment that's closer to work, which is an extra $300 a month. Then you decide to upgrade your car lease, which adds another $150. Then, because you're making the big bucks now, you start saying yes to the expensive dinners and the better gym membership. Suddenly, you hear that $625 is down to maybe $45 of actual uncommitted cash. You did all that work for a raise that effectively bought you a nice lunch once a month. No wonder you feel like your income is still too small. You've just increased the cost of being you without increasing your freedom. The psychology behind this is something called the Diderot Effect. It's named after a French philosopher who got a nice new scarlet robe as a gift. It was beautiful, but then he looked around his study and realized his old chair looked like trash compared to the robe. So he bought a new chair. Then his desk looked cheap, so he bought a new desk. Pretty soon, he was in debt because he was trying to make the rest of his life match the status of his new robe. This is what happens to you every time you get a promotion. You get a new robe. Maybe it's a title, maybe it's a literal piece of clothing, or maybe it's just the feeling of a higher number on your tax return. Suddenly, your old life feels insufficient. You start looking at your 5-year-old phone or your scuffed-up couch as problems that need to be solved because they don't match the version of you that makes $70,000. You aren't buying things because you need them. You're buying them to satisfy a psychological need for consistency. Look, here's another truth that's going to sting a little bit. Your income feels small because you've outsourced your happiness to your monthly payments. We live in a subscription economy now, and it's death by 1,000 cuts. It's not just Netflix and Spotify. It's the Pay in 4 apps that let you buy shoes you can't afford. It's the car payment that's $700 a month. It's the house that's 500 square feet bigger than you actually use. When you commit your future income to monthly payments, you are literally selling your future time to a bank. Let's do a second math example here. If you have a $600 car payment and you're making $30 an hour after taxes, you are working 20 hours every single month just to pay for the hunk of metal sitting in your driveway. That is 2.5 full workdays every month where you are effectively a slave to a car manufacturer. If you have 4 or 5 of these minor payments, you might be working half your month just to pay for things you already own. When you only see half of your paycheck as yours, your income is always going to feel tiny. There is also a massive perception gap that social media has created. Look, 50 years ago, you only knew what your immediate neighbors were doing. If you were doing as well as the guy next door, you felt rich. Now, you are comparing your behind the scenes to the highlight reels of the entire world. You see people on your screen who are making $500,000 a year and living like gods, and even if you don't think you're being influenced, your brain is subconsciously resetting its baseline for what a normal life looks like. You think you're failing because you aren't flying private or eating at Michelin-starred restaurants, even though, by historical standards, you are living like royalty. This constant state of relative deprivation makes any income level feel like poverty. You could make $1 million a year, but if you spend all your time looking at billionaires, that million is going to feel like pocket change. Now, here is the counterintuitive twist. Making more money can actually make you feel poorer if you aren't careful. When you have a low income, your financial life is simple. You have very few choices, which is stressful in one way but clear in another. As your income grows, the complexity of your life explodes. You have more accounts, more insurances, more taxes, more maintenance on more stuff, and more people expecting you to pay for things. This complexity tax eats up your mental bandwidth. If you don't have a system to handle that complexity, you end up feeling overwhelmed and broke because you never know where the money is actually going. A person making $50,000 with zero debt and a simple life often feels much wealthier than a person making $200,000 who is buried under the weight of 3 properties and 4 luxury car loans. High income without simplicity is just a high-stress cage. So what should you actually do? Here is the practical takeaway, and it requires you to be a little bit of a weirdo compared to your friends. You need to implement an income floor. The next time you get a raise, or even starting with your next paycheck, I want you to pick a lifestyle level and freeze it. If you can live comfortably on $5,000 a month right now, then $5,000 is your floor. Any dollar you earn above that floor does not exist as spending money. It goes directly, automatically, and immediately into a separate account for investing or debt payoff. You don't even let it touch your checking account. By freezing your floor, you are finally putting a lid on the container. You're allowing the pressure of your wealth to build up instead of letting it expand into a bigger, more expensive, and ultimately more stressful life. You also need to apply the 72-hour rule to any purchase over $100. If you see something you want, you have to wait 3 full days before you hit the buy button. Usually that Diderot Effect itch, the one that says you need the new desk to match the new robe, will fade after 48 hours. If you still want it after 3 days, and it fits within your floor, then fine. But you'll find that 70% of the stuff you thought was a necessity was actually just a temporary brain glitch caused by a marketing email or a social media post. Your income doesn't feel small because you aren't making enough. It feels small because you're trying to use money to solve problems that money can't fix, like your status, your boredom, or your need to fit in. The moment you stop using your paycheck as a tool for validation and start using it as a tool for freedom is the moment you'll realize you probably already have enough. You don't need a bigger shovel. You just need to stop digging the hole deeper every time you get a little more dirt. Wealth isn't about how much you make. It's about how much of your life you actually own.